Okay, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Mark Giordano. I'm a professor at the Georgetown University School of Foreign Service based in Washington, D.C. What my personal work is mostly on water that crosses international boundaries and whether you fight or don't fight or cooperate or how do you write treaties, as well as agriculture-water interactions. And I'm here today to moderate this session on, broadly speaking, climate change in this region and more broadly. And what we're going to do is have each of our panelists speak for a few minutes, one by one, and then we're going to open it up directly into questions. And we're going to start out with Diana Francis from Khalifa University in Abu Dhabi, who's going to give us some overview of what do we know about climate change in the region to set off the rest of our conversation. That'll be followed by Deema Masri, who you just heard in the previous sessions, who's going to give some of her takes on it. Then we move to Sami Ghamdi from KAUST. I'm trying to think of the exact how I spell out the KAUST. Okay, just outside of Jeddah, and then Dr. Mahdi Zarghami from University of Tehran, as well as the University of Sharif Governance and Policy think tank. So with that, let me turn it over to Diana.
Thank you so much for the introduction. I think I have to stand to see my slides. So I'd like to thank the Georgetown University for organizing this event. It was really nice to listen to all the talks this morning, very insightful. So today I'm gonna show broadly what does it mean climate change for us, for our daily life. So I'm a climate and atmospheric scientist. I work at Khalifa University in United Arab Emirates. I'm also the head of the Environmental and Geophysical Sciences Lab, where we actually study and investigate the science and the fingerprints of climate change in our region specifically. So this graph shows you the evolution of the global mean temperature since 1960 and to date, as well as the projections under different scenarios. Of course, based on this graph, we can see that we are actually heading toward reaching the 1.5 degrees Celsius by 2030, and some studies are showing that this may actually be reached even before, and I'll touch on this later on in my talk. So this global average temperature number that we give generally is actually different if we look into the distribution of the temperature change across the globe. So the temperature change relative to the global average is actually different from one area to another. And this map is showing you the speed of the global change in terms of temperature across the regions. So here you can see that there are some areas that are warming much faster than others, and some areas here in blue are actually warming slower than the global average. So if we focus on our region here, we see that it is warming almost twice faster than the global average. So this means that we have less time actually to act on climate change in our region. Another metrics to see the impacts of global climate change is actually the rise in sea level, and this is particularly relevant for the coastal regions, such as the Qatar and the Gulf countries. And these are the changes that we can observe around our region. So, and this, of course, will give, on a short-term basis, will give birth to extreme weathers. Because these changes in temperature and in humidity in the atmosphere at global scale will generate extreme weathers when we look into the short term. So these can take the form of droughts, floods, storm surge, heat waves, wildfires, for instance. This morning we heard about it. And that's why the action is actually is urgent. These are the projections that are given lately by the IPCC under different scenarios. So instead of having only one curve, here we are seeing the distribution of this increase in temperature on a global scale. What does it mean for each region? Okay, and the most important maybe factors for us and in this event, which is about water, is to look into the droughts and the precipitation. So these are the projections under different scenarios for droughts. Okay, you can see here in the region there are some signs, for instance, for extreme droughts, especially at the northern part of the Arabian Peninsula and all the Mediterranean basins, if we look into the MENA region. In terms of precipitation, if we take the annual wettest day, how this will change under these different scenarios, okay, you can see that this region actually will experience more rainfall. Why? Because the process behind it is the expansion of the Hadley cell, which is the main driver for the global circulation. So meaning the subtropics regions that we know now will become tropics, and the subtropics will move further north if we are looking into the northern hemisphere, and they will move further south if we are looking into the southern hemisphere. Let's focus more on the Arabian Peninsula or the Middle East area. So these are the projections from high-resolution models, showing here the status up to 2060, and here up to the end of the century in terms of temperature, and these are for the most pessimistic scenario, which is 8.5. And we can see that the projected increase in annual mean temperature is actually 5 degrees per decade for the region, which is a lot, especially if we consider the summer that is already extreme in this area. How about rainfall? So again, we project the data on the region for climate models at high resolution, and we can see that there are different patterns that are appearing in the projections, where the southern part of the Arabian Peninsula will most likely experience increase in precipitations, whereas the northern part will experience dryness and droughts. So we looked also into the trends, so meaning we take historical data to see if this is something that we can see in the previous data that we have. And this is actually the case. We found here that the rainfall actually over the UAE, for instance, has been increasing since 2000 and to date. So this actually comes with, of course, several impacts, because any change in the weather will impact several factors. And we do have some cascading climate risks that can result from one change in the climatic factors. So we can have impacts on the soil moisture, for instance, and then this will impact the food chain. We can have impact on the economy, on the water. So this again calls for action. And of course, we all know that the cause of this warming is anthropogenic greenhouse gases. The main ones are CO2, methane, and N2O. And these are the activities that are leading to the increase in these anthropogenic greenhouse gases. Now, one point I want to stress out is actually that not only greenhouse gases are contributing to this warming or climate change, but also the contribution from pollutant, especially aerosols, which are serving us for now, meaning that they are masking some of the warming. So these aerosols are actually cooling a part of the warming that is induced by greenhouse gases. Now the tricky situation is that these aerosols, we can remove them very quickly from the atmosphere in terms of weeks or months, whereas the greenhouse gases, they can stay here for decades and centuries. So that means that if these aerosols are reduced in the coming years, there will be an additional warming to the greenhouse gases. And that's why I said in my first slide that maybe the 1.5 degrees Celsius will be reached even sooner than 2030, because a lot of efforts are being done to reduce pollution because of the impacts on health and on the life of people, the quality of life. But there is a side effect of that, is that this will induce additional warming that actually policy and all the strategies need to account for, not to be surprised in like decade that we reduce pollution, but why we have more warming. So there is this competing factor between pollution and greenhouse gases that need to be, treated as under a common framework in order to reach what we aspire to reach. And these are, you all know about the impacts of climate change, but there are also solutions. And as we heard this morning, there is for any challenge, we can look at it as a challenge or as opportunity. So these are some of the solutions that can be put forward. And I'm happy later to discuss more on this. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Deema, do you want to follow that? We're just going to go through and then we'll have the question.
Okay.
Yep.
So I'll just add on to.
However you want to. Yeah.
Okay. So my name is Dr. Deema Masri. I'm a senior policy associate at Earthna, as Mark mentioned. I have a background in chemical engineering. I went on to do my PhD in sustainable environment and worked at Curie as a scientist. Did research over there for about 10 years on wastewater treatment and reuse, as well as modifying desalination technologies in terms of the materials, such as the membranes themselves. After that, I moved to Earthna and entered the policy realm. This is recent. And so as, if you were in the talk this morning, if I'm gonna highlight several water security concerns due to climate change. One of them, the major one I see, is groundwater. I won't delve into it more because I did discuss it in the morning, but with climate change, with the rising temperature, as well as the limited amount of rainfall in the country, as well as the region, groundwater has been an issue. It's depletion as well as the degradation. So there are several measures that we need to take into account, and the country is doing that in terms of monitoring the wells, as well as making sure that none of the wells are digged without licenses from the country, as well as preserving the groundwater. And so in the future, they will preserve the groundwater used for mainly agricultural crops and not fodder itself. For fodder, they're going to allow the use of other non-conventional water resources. So that's number one. And I mentioned alternative non-conventional water resources, and that's something that Qatar really needs to tap into to diversify its water resources. Because with climate change, you don't know, right now, currently, for example, desalination is the main source of potable water use in Qatar. So we need to make sure that there is another water source. And in the break, someone approached me and asked me if there was another potable water source other than desalinated water. And while groundwater could be used in a way, the country is not planning on using it. So there are other technologies that could be used that Qatar can implement for potable water, such as fog harvesting, air-to-water generators that take in humidity from the air and generate water from that. So basically, this is the entire aspects of the holistic approach of that. And at Earthna, what we do is we look at everything that's going on in Qatar. So we're the ears, and we like to know what's going on in Qatar in terms of research, projects, and activities. And we try to go move a few steps forward to see what projections and scenarios would look like in the future, and try to implement policy recommendations to provide to the ministry and the country.
Super. Thanks, Sami.
Hello, everyone. Is my mic working? Yes. So hello, everyone, and it's my pleasure to be with you here today. And my name is Sami Ghamdi, and I am a professor of sustainable urban systems in KAUST, King Abdullah University of Science and Technology in Saudi Arabia. And mainly the work that I do, I work on quantifying sustainability and resiliency within urban systems. And as all of you know that water is a crucial and one major element within those systems. And just to start with, I would like to say that we have very advanced and sophisticated water systems here in the GCC. And actually I used to live, for example, in Michigan. And as you know, that Michigan is surrounded by the Great Lakes. And our water systems here in the GCC is way far advanced compared to the water system in Detroit or in Chicago, for example. Yet there is a challenges that specifically raised or within the GCC that we really need to address it and work with here, in particular in a regional scale. My friend Diana here mentioned the importance of climate change and our contribution to climate change, and then the impact of climate change. So we are working on both sides, trying to quantify what is actually our impact to the climate change and what is the impact of climate change on us. So we always talk about carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. I want you always to keep in mind that carbon itself, it's just an indicator. What we care about the impact that indicator causes. So if we talk about, for example, the most important technology here in the GCC in water system, which is desalination. Desalination has a major contribution to greenhouse gas emissions, meaning that we are intensifying or increasing our impact to the climate change. Yet, there is another problem that we don't look at it at the regional scale. So for example, when we are talking about climate change, this is an impact, okay? There is another impact, for example, we call it acidification. So how is the desalination system or any other system that we have in our built environment contribute to acidification? Actually, desalination has a significant impact on acidification, sea acidification, meaning that we really need to mitigate that impact and not focus only on carbon emissions or greenhouse gas emissions. Why I'm saying this? Because for many decades here in the GCC, we focused on energy per water produced. And that, of course, we think that when we reduce energy, we are reducing greenhouse emissions. Yet there is other environmental impact categories that left behind. So we are not investigating those environmental impact categories. This is from a sustainability perspective. Now, when we think about the whole life cycle of a water in the built environment, from raw material processing, which is desalination, and then distribution, storage, and then wastewater processing or treatment at the end of the stage, and then how it can contribute. So in KAUST, and before I moved to KAUST, actually I was working here for Qatar Foundation for 7 years. We built many environmental models that try to quantify sustainability along those different stages: desalination, distribution and storage, and then wastewater. Now, what I want you to keep in mind here is that when we recover any product or water from these cycles, actually we are mitigating the impact of desalination. Meaning that if I recover water, like wastewater reuse, then you are mitigating the impact that you initiate in the first stage, which is desalination. Along these stages, there's many chances for GCC to be advanced in those processes, and even efficiency requirement is higher than other parts of the world. I heard today in the morning many good discussions about wastewater utilization and then also brine utilization. One of the projects that we are working on in KAUST is focusing on extracting valuable minerals and products from the brine before you discharge it back to the sea. Now, what is the point there is that, again, enhancing the sustainability from the three pillars of sustainability. From economic, of course, you are generating high value products. From a social, you're creating jobs, you're creating an industry that can thrive on the brine utilization. And the most important is the environmental. You are actually offsetting the environmental impact that you are producing in the first place. Just to keep in mind how valuable is this, actually within the GCC, there is many actually commercial scale utilization of brine, for example, magnesia for cement replacement, for lithium for electric vehicles, batteries, and so on. There is so many other chemicals and minerals that are extracted to be used in the petrochemical industry. So this is for the sustainability side. Now, the other side that I work on is the resiliency side. So we are all focusing on one source for water for the whole urban areas here in Qatar. Maybe agriculture sector, we have other alternatives, but for urban areas within the GCC, we are 100% relying on desalination. And a state like Qatar or Kuwait or Bahrain, even the shoreline is very, any accident can happen in the Gulf, can change the whole landscape of how the water security that we are talking here about. So for example, we're talking about oil spills, okay? How an oil spill can impact desalination, nuclear accidents, random failure, any issues that happen, any other event that induced by climate change, for example, algae blooms. Okay, so there is two types of desalination. You heard it today many times. There is a thermal desalination and there is a membrane technology. And membrane technology actually is suffering a lot of scientific and technological challenges within the Gulf due to many issues. High salinity, shallow water, high turbidity. Algae blooms is just one event of algae blooms can shut off the whole RO plant, okay? Meaning that there is some technological challenges. Saudi Arabia, UAE, and Oman, they are not facing the same problems because they have access to the Red Sea and the Arab Sea, which has a different ecosystems. So all those challenges raise a significant resiliency challenge for all the GCC states. So how you can be prepared when a crisis happens. And then within the academia and the industry, there is a lot of collaborations. One of the projects that we do here in Qatar Foundation launched just a year ago, a major project in resiliency within state of Qatar. And there is two main projects going on with different entities in Qatar. And just look for resiliency, and water is one major issue there. How we can enhance our resiliency and be prepared in case of anything happen. And how we can measure our resiliency, how we can decide what we are prepared or not. So this is the two sides that I work on, sustainability and resiliency, and I will be happy to answer any questions and of course, answer any question from our chair here. Thank you so much.
Thanks. Dr. Mahdi?
Yes.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Maybe you can sing a song.
Oh, yeah. Okay, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. And thank you so much for the organizer for inviting me. And it is my proud to be here. My colleagues talked about the problems, and I want to talk about the solutions. And if my colleague brings my slides, and I like to, because I have some photos to here. Okay. Hello. Okay, I just want to talk about the collective water security, but the question is that how we could be able to bring collective water security for the Western Asia and Middle East. I want to come back to this picture. It is in the Louvre Museum. It is from Iraq, and this stone come back 2,500 years ago, 2,500 years before the Christ, and something like 4,500 years ago. And it is one of the earliest water treaty, how to solve the water diversion and water allocation that we should learn from our ancient fathers. And I want to talk about water diplomacy, and it is established on 3 pillars, and one is the reframing on the water, thinking differently on the water. The water is not just about H2O. We can change the time of water allocation and change the volume of water allocation, change how we use the water to allocate it to the people. And the second issue is the joint fact-finding, valuing the people, sitting together, thinking of how to use the water and find win-win solutions. In this area and in the scale area, we need to move from the very centralized governmental based management to the distributed ones, where the people has a role on the water management. And also another solution is that finding enabling conditions, and we need recognize our interdependencies. For example, in the Muslim countries, we have similar identities, we have cultures. Today afternoon, we want to go to the museum, and you will see that how this area and how these people are connected together. And then we will be able to create mutual values. And another issue is the issue linkage to find something to give together. For example, recent days, Iran has wanted to help Afghanistan to give them factory, give them electricity, and then in a combination, in the trade-off, they should be allocated water to the downstream country to find the trade-offs. As a two cases from Iran, I can talk with you later about the Lake Oromia, how the country invited different organizations to work together, how to restore the lake. And also another successful case is the Aras Reservoir. It is 50 years of cooperation between Iran and Azerbaijan to reservoir management. Then I am finalizing my talk with that we need, on the water security, we need to cooperate together, to understand together, to work together. And, but it doesn't work every place and every examples. In some cases that the power has imbalance, we should think differently. This is a recent picture from the Gaza and we sent condolences to the kids killed them. And then I want to say that we should find our roots, we should find our values that help to us to move from the threats of climate change and the scarcity, inshallah. Thank you.
So we're going to just turn it immediately over to you to ask questions. But maybe, so while you ponder your first question, I'll just throw out one other idea, which is, we've talked this morning quite a bit about what percentage of water demand in this region is met by desal. But I just want to highlight that that percentage is drinking water. And there's this other, the very much greater part of the water consumption is actually from agriculture, which is grown mostly somewhere else. And so the climate change issue is not only how is it changing in the Gulf, but also how is it changing in the big exporting countries that the Gulf is getting its grain from. So with that, let me stop and turn it over to you, and we can start having a conversation. Over there first.
Thank you. It's indeed fascinating to find different representatives from Gulf states, along with a representative from Iran, talking about water security. And my question is there any cooperation on the ground as the neighbors countries along with the Gulf in that area at the moment? Thank you.
Any takers?
Thank you for the question. So actually there is multiple let's say, international initiatives across both sides of the Gulf, Iran included, Iraq, and all the GCC states. Actually, there is an organization, I forget the name of it, but it's headquartered in Kuwait. It's looking after the desalination impact in the Gulf. And I remember I attended the event a year ago. It was focused on climate change impact on desalination. So there is some cooperation, of course, and there is some governmental laws that actually, especially within the GCC states, regarding desalination. So, for example, when we discharge brine to the Gulf, it's not just an easy process. It's a well-regulated process by the ministries of environment across all the six or like the GCC states. And there is some laws. I remember here in Qatar, Ministry of Environment, they are pushing toward zero liquid discharge and minimizing the discharge of the brine to the Gulf. Let me just give you one technical example of the regulations that are imposed on desalination. So when you discharge the brine to the Gulf, back to the Gulf or to the sea, it's usually, it's a thermal desalination to be warm water. So it's really need to be cooled down before it's discharged to the Gulf to maintain the ecosystem of the Gulf, so to not impact. So yes, there is some cooperation on international level and strict laws regulating desalination in the GCC.
Maybe just following that up a little bit. Since we had the GCC crisis a few years ago, there are obviously issues between one side of the Gulf and the other side of the Gulf. Could any of you envision the challenge of climate change bringing countries more together over cooperation, or would it be a further impediment to cooperation?
I think climate change is a threat, but it could be an opportunity. And you know that we need to work northern and southern parts. We should work together because the Earth is in a very dangerous condition, you know. And we did a very big simulation model in the MIT when I was there. And we simulated that the climate change mitigation would not be succeed without cooperation, you know. And in the region, recently Iran has moved its desalination from the Persian Gulf to the Oman Sea, because you know the Persian Gulf is a very closed system, and now it is under pressure, you know, because of lots of desalination plants. And I think in the future more cooperation is foreseen. Thank you.
Thank you so much. My name is Ali Abu Saba. I'm the Director General of the International Center for Agricultural Research in the Dry Areas, ICARDA. First of all, to really thank the panelists for excellent presentation, you know, starting from the current state to the future state, and of course experiences from you know, many other parts in the region in identifying the problem. I want to come to the point raised by the chair about this is focused on you know, drinking water and domestic uses, but then the greatest challenge really is more on the agriculture and food security, and linking this to the crisis that you know prevailed for a few years among some of the countries in the region, and more critically even during COVID, when the global supply chains have been disrupted for a variety of reasons. And I think we have seen many countries rethinking the whole concept of food security. So my question to the panel here is, there has been a lot of the analysis on the definition of the problem and setting out the projections. I've not heard enough about the solutions. And I think how this work and the projections, which really provide excellent opportunity for understanding the problem that needs to be resolved, by actually taking it one step further to partner with organizations, institutions, even sharing knowledge among countries to find the right solutions. And I want to come on the point of regional you know, collaboration with the area opportunities. Just by sharing one example, we have a program among the GCC countries that brings all 6 of them to research certain areas of priorities, and the research agenda is shared between different countries, so that you don't really need to duplicate, but rather do a lot of complementarity, and then they meet twice and then share the knowledge and experience, including the solutions and the learning. So I think these kind of interventions will be required probably at a much bigger scale, much more organized, and looking more at the aspects of food security. Thank you.
I don't know if any of you want to respond. Yeah.
put the food topic to this panel. Indeed, it's a global problem, but of course, the solutions need to come from the different countries because, we are in the same boat all together. So anything that is happening in one country, it will not stop at the border. So this is the issue. That's why cooperation and collaboration need to be really at the center of all discussions or projects. Now, regarding the collaboration between the GCC countries on the food issue, I think there have been some initiatives between the different countries to face this challenge for their food security that was really felt very harshly during COVID with the interruption of the food supply chain. And also an important aspect of it is to actually share the data between these countries because they share the same environment more or less. It's important to reach a point where the data can be shared between the different countries so we can have this global or regional view of what's happening. In addition to sharing data, sharing experiences instead of spending years to reach the same conclusions we can benefit from and leverage on experience of other countries and centers. So yeah, this is really important to stress out and also to convene it to the youth, to the students and to the next generation to start growing with this idea of collaborating.
Maybe you go 1, 2, 3. There's, the first one was a little bit further, but yes.
I'd like to thank you all. I work here at Georgetown, and I've had the opportunity to see many conferences over the last week talking about a lot of overlapping issues, including global governance and Afghans' water security issues, and now this. So it's really great to see everybody coming together for all of these issues to discuss, the predicament that we're in and how do we get out of it on multiple levels across all layers from the top all the way down to the bottom. But one thing that struck me at this presentation was, of course, most of the talks have been focused on the region. But you mentioned that every decade, the global temperature goes up by 5%, 5 degrees, which my question is, how long can this even last? At what point are we all going to be climate refugees here? And, at what temperature is it completely uninhabitable here in Qatar and the region?
It's true that it is really, scary when we think about it, that this is 5 degrees per decade till the end of the century. We already know what are the extreme temperatures here. How does it feel like to live in an extreme temperature in the summer, reaching 50 or even more? That's why actually adaptations need to be really started, and all actions on adaptation need to be empowered and put as priority, because this is going to happen even if we do mitigations. Mitigations meaning that we want to do actions to reduce the emissions. But as we know, these greenhouse gases, they are here for at least 100 years, okay? Now we have the concentrations that actually we emitted since 1980. So they are going to stay here until the end of the century. That's why we can do projections actually, because we know what is the concentration that will be here until this date or this year. So adaptation is really a critical issue that all policymakers and governments need to face and to start invest in adaptation. It's not easy because adaptation will touch on different economic sectors, on health, on schools, on education, infrastructure. So it needs to start early in order for the people that will be living here in those years can actually face this kind of extremes. In parallel, we need to do mitigations. Mitigations meaning is if we start from now decreasing the greenhouse gas emissions By the time we are adapting to this increased temperature, we start at the same time, having reasonable temperatures to get out of this circle.
Just a clarifying question. The number you had on there was 5 degrees Celsius per decade. Was that the right number?
It's correct. It's 5 degrees Celsius per decade. Yeah, until the end of the century.
Please.
So just to add in the food security and the livability of the cities within the Gulf. So now climate change has impact definitely within the cities here in the Gulf and globally in the different levels of impact on each cities. What is unique about this conference, and what we really do need to keep it in mind, is that water is going across borders. It's not like the temperature, for example. So temperature, if it's impact Doha or Abu Dhabi or Riyadh, it's a local issue. So but water, whatever happened across the planet, it impacts everyone. Just like an example of real cases that happen here in the GCC. Now we know that most of the food is, of course, imported in the GCC, and there is major companies within the GCC that are trying to secure the whole supply chain. And if you know that let's say the crop number 1 that is imported is rice. It's rice is coming from India. So anything happen in India in the monsoon season due to climate change, it will impact our food security here. Another example is the largest company for food in the Middle East called Marai from Saudi Arabia. They bought land to raise falfa, which is the feedstock for their livestock here in Saudi Arabia from Arizona, and they comply with the laws, but the laws keep changing due to climate change. So due to the scarcity of water in Arizona or other places in the world. So keep in mind that the impact of climate change, that is actually, there is no border for the impact of climate change, especially in water. Now, for my colleagues here, when she mentioned the livability of, and that's the different story, although it's really important, but it's not unique as the water connections here between borders. Livability in the GCC, my colleague here, Diana, mentioned that the temperature reached 50 Celsius. Now, there is 2 types of temperature that we usually measure. There is a dry bulb temperature, which you hear it, 50 Celsius, and we can survive 55. That's okay. The question is, there is another challenge that we have, is something called wet bulb temperature, which human can tolerate up to 37 only. And temperature is projected in the Gulf states here, in Qatar, Kuwait, Bahrain, especially coastal cities, to actually exceed that threshold, meaning that a few months of the year, no work at outdoor, and in the near future, the whole year will be above that threshold. So this is a challenge that we deal with in livability and water or food security across borders.
Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for all of your very interesting insights. So my question is about failed states. And in the region here, we have our fair share of failed states: Lebanon, Yemen, Syria, Libya, so on and so forth. And those states also happen to be extremely water insecure for a very wide variety of reasons. A lot of what we've discussed so far, like desalinization, I'm Lebanese, so I can talk about Lebanon. It's out of reach for Lebanon. Lebanon does not have the human capital nor the financial the finances to invest in it and to be able to use it to provide for its population. So what can be done for failed states, and especially, once again, Lebanon, that's heavily reliant on agriculture for its economy, especially right now? What can be done for a country like Lebanon, or for any failed states in the region, in order for them to be able to achieve a certain degree of water security? Thank you.
Please.
I don't know if my mic is okay. You brought up a very good point. Now, desalination is it's not very economic for these countries. And one of the research that we're working on is how to make it cost effective. Some countries, instead of using fossil fuel, which some countries may not have, how about using solar energy, wind power, for example, that's used in Australia, as well as tidal power as well. So these options need to be studied, in order to be incorporated in those countries, but you also need to see if it's suitable for their environment as well. For countries such as, we'll say Syria, Lebanon, in some areas they can invest more in rainwater harvesting techniques. There's something that I wanted to bring up now. So we are doing a study on looking at traditional and ancestral practices and knowledge that could be utilized right now in these countries that do not have the money to actually fund these projects. And from those, we are looking into countries. It's basically a project with the Commonwealth. We're looking at countries worldwide to look at what traditional practices have been done in these countries, as well as by the indigenous people, to see what they did in order to manage their water resources and water security. And some of them are actually still practicing them. So the part of that study is to actually see what these people are doing in their country and looking into how we can actually, they can be applied in other countries and whether they'd be suitable or not. So that's one thing to look into. It's a bit outside of the box, but we kind of forgot about what ancestors used to do, and some of them are still, if you go to some villages, they're still applying it. And there are some farmers in some, for example, in Sudan, and my colleague told me about this. In Sudan, there are some farmers that could actually tell you when rain is coming, even better than the weather forecast, just because of the knowledge that they have. So, and they know when to plant the crops, and they don't have to study anything or do anything. So that's what we're planning on doing. So that's one way of looking into it.
I want to add some items to what you said for some countries that has less investment. Honestly, I want to emphasize on the demand management in addition to water recycling, water recycling. If you look at our body, it has created that every time the blood is recycled every time we don't need to inject the blood to our body. It is recycled. And also as a experience from Iran, and we need a job creation to be less dependent on water, and move some part of our farmers or their child to the new jobs, like tourism, like to high-tech technologies, to work on that, to make money. And also coming back to Syria, I think Syria needs more strong diplomacy and negotiation with the Turkey to get more its water right from the Euphrates. And this is a solution that I provide. Thank you.
Oh, awesome. Hello, thank you all for being here today. So we've talked a lot in this session about the importance of collaboration and water as a shared resource, but we also know that it's often adaptation at the local level that comes first. So I was wondering if you could speak a little bit to that balance, maybe that conflict, that in practice, what does that look like? How do you continue to collaborate and meet larger common goals while also meeting local needs and local demands?
Yes.
Okay, so
yeah.
So, of course, let's say the successful deployment need to be started at the low level, okay? But the strategy or the overreach umbrellas need to be from like a larger scale. Here in the GCC, we have really unique challenges. Like, let me give you one challenge here in Qatar. If you account for the water that is lost during the distribution, okay, how much you imagine, how much this water is lost in the pipelines underground? How much you think is that? It's about 20%. Okay. Yes, it is a huge. I'm sorry. More than 30%. More than 30%. This is more. Okay, but here in Kahraman, for example, estimated about 21%, okay? 40%, okay? So what I want you to think about is what that 40% mean? Mean that for each gallon of water you consume, there is 40% what's consumed is gone in the way to you. Meaning that even when you are talking about sustainability or emissions, that emission was lost there. Okay. Now we are talking about the GCC here, very fancy infrastructure, relatively new infrastructure. I mentioned in the beginning Detroit and Chicago. You compare the pipelines here in Doha compared to Chicago or Detroit. I mean, what we are talking about? We're talking about really fancy systems here. Yet we have this big amount of loss. So this is one of the unique things that we have it here at local level need to be addressed. Doha is not Abu Dhabi. Abu Dhabi is not Riyadh. Riyadh is not Jeddah. Meaning really we need at local scale innovative solutions for minimizing that loss. And we're talking about 40%, my friend here saying, I'm saying 20% for Doha. It's too much. I mean, imagine how much water is lost there, okay? So that is at the local level, that's really need to have an impact. Just a final word about like awareness here. I remember I used to live here in Doha for 6 years. Within Qatar Foundation, we have like an outreach program that we bring school kids and we educate them about sustainability and desalination. You'll be surprised that most of the kids, and even the adult population, they didn't know where does the water come from. If you ask them, they would think, I remember I used to work in a workshop for 2 weeks with people to educate them about water, and they think that when I mean by desalination, I mean this. This is desalination. And they don't imagine that even the water that you use to wash your car here in Qatar is coming from desalination. Most of the urban areas, actually, they don't have like a recycled wastewater that serves those areas. Actually, it's desalinated water that you use for your grass. So it's a really challenging issue at the local level before you go even higher. I hope this answered your question.
Other questions from the audience? Yes.
Assalamu alaikum. My name is Mohammad Uzair and I'm an electrical engineer. So that's from my point of view. My question is that today is very important for our youngsters. Conferences, these type of conferences. My question is that you know about that today nowadays very countries is in the race of chemical industries and chemical equipments and weapons and something like that. So the Saudi Arabia and Qatar is the peace ambassadors and we're very proud of them. So how can we control these countries, because you know about that not for chemical. We use oil refineries and something chemical industries. They produce more toxic rays and smokes. So when the rain is came, it's called toxic and chemical rain, and they damage our industrial and agriculture system. And the second question is that you know about it in Gaza, very little children are affected with the thrust and something. So how can we give knowledge to them to go for the like that without electricity and something solars, and we go the natural resources, made wells and tube wells like that, and they don't need, they depends on other countries for electricity and water supply. So that's why we talked to them and told them they go to the natural resources. They made well, and they don't need any to provide them water. The children don't face like trust and same. They go to the well and drink water, and water is, you know about, also is a good food. So is the power of convey their some. And my point of view is that when I'm in the university, every student is focused on electrical devices and some things more than like that. So my point of view that we go to the in past basic on the natural resources. They provide some simple motor, and they produce water from the dam, and that's you. I think you got my point. My English is not so fluent, so I'm trying my best. Thank you.
Thank you. Any reflections?
Can you please?
I think there were a few questions there. One was about cooperation over like air quality and how do countries come together over
two
that?
questions. One question is that how we control the other countries to the reduce chemical things, and second is that to go to the natural resources to produce when they have a pandemic situation, we use them. and not for the depends on others. They cut our electricity and water supply. So that's, thank you.
If I may comment quickly here, when you are talking about the chemical production here at the GCC and then like the acid rains or any other environmental impact or hazards, this is what we mentioned in the beginning, is that we really need to have a holistic sustainability framework, making sure that you're addressing all the environmental hazards, not only climate change or greenhouse gas emissions. Because in the chemical industry here in the GCC, we have too many substances that is released actually to air, to water, to soil. So it's not need like a holistic framework that go over all those environmental categories. So I hope this answers your question. The second one about the natural resources, this is what actually we discuss here in this conference, and the dialogue will keep going for integration of, for example, of renewable to desalination systems. This is really important. But just to, because you are an electrical engineer, I will give you an astonishing number here. If you can imagine that if you want to meet the demand of desalination in Qatar, the amount of water that produced daily in Qatar, how much solar power you need? You need 1/3 of Qatar to be covered by solar panels. Imagine, you see how huge the problem is? So it's not as simple as just plugging some photovoltaic panels and then you will be able to run your desalination. So there's a lot of work is going on in the research, on academia side and also industry side to try to really increase the efficiency of desalination plant to use less energy and also to increase the efficiency of those renewable energy systems to produce more electricity. So from both sides. And I hope this is one of the solutions that can really help failed state that my friend mentioned here about Lebanon or others, or even Gaza. One of the innovative technology that actually has been done in the GCC here is portable desalination plants. It's a desalination plant is like a boat. It can move, it can go to Gaza and then supply them with water when you need it. But again, it's still energy intensive, so you need a lot of let's say, fuels, a lot of fuels, natural gas or crude oil, or it's a bit challenging. It's not an easy process to be able to solve all the issues.
I'll just add on the international cooperation side, like, we lament that we can't get a climate agreement, but we can find examples of international cooperation that we could draw in some ways from. Like, the Montreal Protocol was mentioned this morning on ozone. And then on acid rain in particular, I just mentioned that the US and Canada had a long problem that was resolved through cooperation. So there are models out there to at least take as a starting point.
So basically, to get out of the effect of greenhouse gases and the feedback from their increase into our lives, we basically need to go through energy transition, meaning that we need to reduce the part that is coming from fossil fuels and coal, and increase the part that is coming from renewable energies or alternative energies if we include the nuclear energy sources. So diversifying the energy is really a key factor in this battle, because at the end we need energy to sustain the lifestyle we have and the economy. So solar energy was mentioned. Wind energy is also important in some parts of the region. And the UAE, for instance, started as well the nuclear power plant. So now it's providing 20% of the energy from nuclear sources. So this kind of alternatives can be also put in place in order to reduce our reliance on fossil fuels and coal.
Yes, Jamie.
So thinking about the title of this panel with climate change and new realities, and one of the new realities that's come up just sort of tangentially in a few of these questions and comments is the new realities of education that are needed, both educating students, but also educating communities. And I would love to hear about your different institutions that you're from and the way that they're working with, or just the way that you see kind of the new educational realities as we move into this different world where our attention really is dominated in large part by these sustainability challenges and solutions.
Thank you for this question. I can maybe start.
Yeah, we can just come down the row. Maybe. Sorry?
I just want to add to, I want to add to your very valuable note on education. And we need also in the higher education to create new syllabuses, new courses, and from the traditional engineering and science to the interdisciplinary sciences, and it is a message for the Georgetown in Qatar and other universities and campus to work on what we need in the future to educate the students.
Yeah.
Say about the experience at Khalifa University, for instance. We introduced a new course 2 years ago. It's called Grand Challenges. And this course is for all the new students to the university, so first year, whether they are in the engineering or science or medical college. So this course is actually about the sustainability goals that are given by the United Nations. We know that we have 30 sustainability goals that are agreed upon from the different countries under the United Nations framework. So this course actually introduced this kind of critical thinking for the students. What does it mean, sustainability? What does it mean, each goal of those? The life on land, the life in the seas, the life in dry regions. So this is the first course that introduced this kind of questions to new joiners to the university. Then in each departments, of course, they have their own courses on the environment, on earth science, and different aspects of it. So just to say that this kind of topics started really to take their place in the university and in the education, and it's expected actually to increase with now creation of new curriculum in energy transition in collaboration with ADNOC, which is the company for oil in the United Arab Emirates. So they realized that they actually going to an energy transition, and they need actually qualified people in this domain to start in their company. So from now, with Khalifa University, they started a master degree on energy transition topics in general. So why we need this, how we can do it, what are the technologies needed, what are the policies and agreements that are needed for this. This is from Khalifa University side. Maybe at KAUST as well.
Deema or Sami, do you want to add anything to that?
To mention the importance is I can see the awareness or engagement of community on, let's say, college level. It's really important, but in my opinion, it's really easy to do. The more challenging is young ages, engaging a student from K to 12. This is really a challenge. When I used to be here in Qatar Foundation, we have a program for young learners from K to 12, where we engage them in serious discussions about important topics. Water was one of them. And unfortunately, the curriculum sometimes is just imported from somewhere else, and does not have really significant issues like what we deal with here. As I mentioned, when you mentioned desalination, kids in schools here in Qatar does not know even the word what it means. Okay. And I'm assuming that if you meet 14 years old or 10 years old in Midwest, he will tell you how the corn is grown in the Midwest of United States. If you met somebody in India, he would explain to you the whole rice cycle in India, how it's happening, because they know that this is a local issue and they are well aware of it. Here in the GCC, this is, I find it unfortunately, you meet even 18 years old, and how the water is made in GCC, they have no ideas. One of the initiatives that we do in KAUST, KAUST collaborated with Frontiers, major publishers, and they're producing like a journal. It's called Young Minds, and it's actually published in English, Hebrew, and Arabic. And they focus on different issues. They have an issue of like water and food security, and even other issues. And that's really targeted. It costs a lot of money, but it's really, in my opinion, important and essential for the community, and especially young minds, young learners. This is, in my opinion, because we are talking about sustainability, the future of those generations. So they can take matters in their hands if they understand those issues in early ages.
I'd like to add on to that. Since Dr. Sami mentioned the young learners. So what we do at Earthna is we're policy research as well as advocacy, and so one major aspect of what we do is go and advocate. And it's not only to the community, but to the adults, but we go to the universities, we publish opinion pieces online, as well as policy briefs. But we also look at the younger generation. So for example, today there's an Eco School Congress, which is for one of the schools in Qatar happening right now that's hosted and conducted by Earthna. It's basically an entire day full of talks and activities to tell the students about how to live in a holistic way, trying to preserve educating them about Qatar's ecology, the environment, as well as the water resources that it has. And one of my coworkers actually recently published a book on Qatar's ecology, and one of what we hope is to actually get it to the ministry and have them give it to the schools and teach the schools about, give them a book about that was done by an author in Qatar that really did study the ecology and the biodiversity, and she would go to the deserts and actually stay there for days and study it very well. So that's what we're trying to have to implement books published by the local authors in the schools as well.
I would just add that if you think about the arc of education here, or arc of awareness, I used to work for a place called the International Water Management Institute, and 20 years ago, one of our biggest missions was getting water on the global agenda. So I think we already forgot how, now everybody talks about global water crisis, but 20 years ago, there were places with serious water challenges, but it wasn't viewed as a global issue. So part of it is getting knowledge to everybody out that it's an issue, but it also then makes me reflect on how it takes a long time to develop institutions to solve problems. And if you went from not viewing that there was a water problem to needing to developing institutions to manage it, that takes a long time. So it may not sound positive, but I'm trying to actually sound positive here. That we now have it where there's an awareness, there's people coming to a conference like this. Also, you think up until then, if you said what's a water problem and how do you solve it, the water problem was how to develop more water. Basically an engineering challenge. How can you put in one more dam? It was on the construction side. So also now you have to change, okay, who's in the water ministry? Is it, what percentage is engineers versus lawyers or versus facilitators of cooperation? And these things in the water schools take time. So it's to say education is critical. And I think they have things like this at one level going on. The Earth Commons Institute that we're trying to develop is another stage in that way. And so I actually, there's many things that have to happen at all levels, but from awareness to the training for people who can actually implement change. But I see things happening, actually. We can maybe take one more question from the audience down in the front row, and then after that, we'll let everybody say a final comment or a few to wrap us up.
With regards to the international and global governance, do we have already established legislation which is ready to accept and actually follow up on the data that is collected, not weaponized against the countries, but a cooperation, as we mentioned, because until now it's still used as a weapon towards each other. So are we ready to have this new system?
Any of you want to answer that? Are we ready to have a new data sharing collection and sharing system related to climate data generally or water data generally?
So, well, I mean, I had several meetings with people from Karama and the ministry, and they mentioned apparently Qatar will have its data relevant to water, at least to my knowledge, related to water, public in about 3 years. So I'm optimistic. I'm hoping that works because that would solve a lot of problems. So yeah, that's the information that I have, and I hope that's a huge step forward. And I believe that if they do share data to the public, many projects would come up that would actually allow the country to thrive.
I think probably the other session that's happening right now is addressing this in another way, because there's so much change happening in satellite acquisition of data, new sensors that can measure evapotranspiration, that it may be, or even if some of you are aware of the GRACE satellite systems, that you can measure the withdrawal of groundwater because of the change of the gravitational force of the Earth. It's going to be harder and harder to hide your water data.
Yeah.
So that may also push change in willingness to share if you know it's mostly going to be found out anyway. Maybe can we just we start with Diana? Maybe if you have any final comments to wrap this up.
Yeah, I mean, my final comment would be to actually be positive about this problem. I know it's really sometimes hard to keep positive when we read this data, when we see, when we try to imagine what's the future holds for our next generation. But as we know, we've been able to, overcome, for instance, the problem with the ozone hole, which was again a life-threatening climate event. This we did it with technology, with also decisions that were made by different countries, and hopefully with the COP that is coming to the UAE next month or at the end of this month, there will be this agreement among the policymakers to actually start actions, not only agreeing on something and without putting a plan of actions to how to do it. We know what we have to do, but what's needed now is how to do it. So,
from my end, I'd just like to say, talk about, just in a few sentences, just to sum up everything. I believe one way of tackling climate change is, and a colleague brought it up in the audience, is to actually share data. And sharing data is very important because that gives you much more, gives more depth into collaboration, which is very necessary. So a lot of times people may work in silo and they feel like that is the best way, but it's always better to share whatever you have because someone else might add onto that and then you'll come up with a much better idea. So there's that from that point of view. And there's also, we were talking about the supply sector mostly, but there's also our role and responsibility in the demand sector. And Dr. Sami mentioned that briefly initially. If you think about every bottle of water that you're drinking, there are carbon dioxide emissions that come from desalination plants from that. Or not even, if it's not the emissions, it's the brine. So always look at it from that aspect. A lot of times we just drink water and take it for granted, but there's a whole process happening in the background and we are contributing in an indirect way in affecting and causing climate change or not. So it's basically to be more aware of, on a personal level, to be more aware of our actions and habits as well.
Sami?
No. Okay, from my end, I would like to just mention a few things that quantification of sustainability, resiliency of our water system is really crucial for us to make well-informed decisions. Without understanding the full life cycle of how the water is produced, how it's used, and then what is the end of life of that water, what will happen. If it's not really quantified in a scientific way, it will be a waste of time to just compare between those different alternatives. When you are talking about integration, for example, of renewable energy in our water systems, that definitely is a sustainable solution, but the question is how much compared to the investment that you are making. So the holistic view is really important here, maintaining the social side, the economic, and the environmental of all of those things. If I would like to leave you with positive things that you think about it, I understand many of the questions was looking for solutions, and unfortunately, me from academia and my colleagues here, we don't have all the answers, but we promise you that we are working with them. Okay, so hopefully one day we will find all the answers for you. But just keep in mind always that the things that you see in front of you, that there is a whole life cycle embedded behind it. My colleagues here at Deema just mentioned the water. One of the little projects that we're working on, the water bottles that you see in the supermarket, here in Qatar, maybe you can find around 20 different types. Some come from Scotland, some from Switzerland, some from France, some from Qatar, some of them from a neighboring country. And all of them, we tested them. They meet the standards for World Health Organization in terms of like the water quality. But from environmental, from a social, from economic perspective, there is a whole new stories behind those different water bottle. So when you make a decision to buy that water bottle, it needs to be really well informed with the whole life cycle behind it. Thank you.
Mahdi?
I want to conclude with public awareness and ask all us and together to put the water and environment in agenda of policymakers. To don't just think about the water companies, to add that the turtles, dolphins, and fishes in the Persian Gulf, they are not in a good condition, and to think about that and thinking about the dried rivers, to put in the agenda of the policymakers. And to that, as a person in the university or other institutions, we should ask the governmental bodies to put more attention on that in this conflicted region. Thank you.
Maybe I'll end with my own comment that, while we often talk about conflict over water, very often when states share water, they're actually cooperating in how it's shared. And that cooperation sometimes happens even while larger conflict or larger disagreement is happening between the states. So not only, I think we should also, another opportunity forward is looking at where are we cooperating over water already? How can that cooperation be used to build the bigger cooperation that, to solve some of the also non-water, non-climate challenges? Well, thank you all for coming. Thank you very much to the panelists for taking their time and sharing their knowledge with us, and hope everyone enjoys the rest of the day in the conference. Thank you.